Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Kahlil Greene here with me today. How you doing, Kahlil?
I'm good. How is everyone? I hope you guys are all doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. That looks like a very regal flag behind you. What am I looking at behind you there?
So it's actually a rug that's been hung up for most of my Zoom classes and interviews and any other thing that I'm doing on Zoom. But it's the seal of Yale University. So there are two laurels, a text in the middle. This is in Hebrew. I have no idea what it says. And then in Latin above it is our motto, Lux et Veritas, which translates to light and truth.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Did you ever take Latin in high school or middle school?
I never took Latin, no.
Okay, but one of the tenets of being a student there is you need to know what that flag says, correct?
I really should learn that. I should get on that sooner rather than later.
Where are you from?
So I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland, which borders Washington, D.C. And I guess fun fact, the town that I'm from specifically is called Germantown, Maryland. And it's ranked as the third most diverse city in America by Wallet Hub. Which puts it above New York and Los Angeles and all the other places that one might think is probably the most diverse.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you talk about diverse, are you also talking about diverse in a suburban area?
Yeah, so it's a suburb, but it's a diverse suburb. So there's a lot of, I think if I had to pinpoint specific ethnic/racial groups that are here, obviously a lot of white people. There's also there was before more, but now there's still a substantial Black American population. There's a lot of Black immigrants, so specifically from East Africa, like Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan. There's a large Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese population here. And then there's a large Hispanic population specifically from El Salvador.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And this is a big deal because there are many places around the country where all of the rich people live in one area or the nice areas, and that might be segregated by race, and everybody else might live in a different area, which might be less fortunate. But for you, it was nothing to, be a upper middle class citizen or upper class citizen next to a white person or a Chinese person or an African person. It was a regular day for you.
So it actually was still segregated, racially and socioeconomically. So the overall place, if you look at the entire map, it's very diverse, but then still sections of it where a Black and brown community, for example, or a place with mostly white people. And the closer you get towards DC, the greater the population of white and East Asian people are, the better the schooling and the better the public resources. So the place where I grew up, my elementary school, for example, was a Title I elementary school, which means that over half of the students are low income. And the middle school I went to it's nicknamed the prison on the hill. There are articles written about it because the facilities are so poor. When I was a sixth grader, they actually fired out of nowhere our principal because our school had failed to meet bare minimum no child left behind policy set by the Obama administration. And then when I went to high school, it was a magnet program, which means they bused me from where I grew up to a different part of the county. Once again, all in this one diverse place. But the schooling is a lot better there. And it's there's a lot of disparities that still exist, even though there's a lot of people from different cultures and backgrounds in one place.
Sure. So let's not be confused when we look at your upbringing for it having been easy or you having been given a silver spoon. Talk to us about your early childhood. What was it like and what was going on?
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of privileges and I'm very thankful for. At least I grew up with two parents. My dad went to college. My mom did not. They're both from New York. So my dad's from Harlem and my mom's from Brooklyn, specifically Bed-Stuy. So if you've ever seen the show Everybody Hates Chris, it's where that takes place. And that's the fun fact she always told me. And I had an older brother growing up. I he's 7 years older than me. And one thing that we both did growing up was we were a part of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, which is something that I still am involved with to this day. But what they were community centers where you could go before school, after school, and during summers. So I was in total there longer than I was actually like in school for the day. And that was also a huge support network. And I think a privilege that I was able to access just by way of there being a Boys and Girls Clubs in my community, which they are widespread throughout the nation, but some places don't have them. And I'd say like my elementary school and middle school, like I said, like they were like kind of underfunded, kind of like a lot of troubles with education, resources, support, both in the facilities, but also like the teaching and education. And when I got to middle school, I think by way of just having Boys and Girls Club, being really interested in specific topics in school and like having like a dad at least that went to college and an older brother that went through the high school experience, I had like the support necessary to apply and successfully test into a magnet program, which was called Poolsville Magnet School, which was, I think, an hour and a half away from where I live, but once again, still in the same county. And that was specific school for STEM, which is science, mathematics, and computer science, and technology and all of that. So I went there and I was the only Black student out of like in total 240 participants in the program throughout the 4 years. And that was hard. I think that was definitely a culture shock to be a part of that community. The way that it broke down is that it was actually mostly East Asian students, then like South Asian, then white, and then like I was only Black student. There was no Latino or Native American students in the entire program. I think that was just something that was hard in a unique way because I had the resources and I had a lot of privileges, but like where the resource dependent and the structural barriers kind of went away because of the funding that was given to the school, the social barriers in terms of like racism and exclusion and like imposter syndrome, and a lot of those other things that are more in terms of like the interpersonal connections and the conversations and like the things in your head, those definitely elevated in that experience. And I think that was just an interesting transition I've gone to. And then now I'm at Yale, I'm a senior now. And I think the experience at Yale is very different. It's both a place with a lot of resources and the necessary supports in terms of social and Black community. So I think that's, it's been probably the most easy ride out of like the different educational experiences I've had so far. But that kind of tells the story of where I'm from and how I got to where I am.
Sure. I'm very happy to hear that Yale is equipped with enough cultural tools to make you feel like you're at home academically and you can excel there and you can be a part of the entire environment and feel included. I think that's great. But I want to take it a step back. You mentioned how the Boys and Girls Club was something that opened other doors for you. I know that a lot of young people, when they go to the Boys and Girls Club, it might be an after-school place where you might get to shoot some pool or shoot some hoops, and then you go home. But you use the Boys and Girls Club as more of a resource than that. Can you educate us on how the Boys and Girls Club really opened up more doors for you, not just from an extracurricular standpoint, but also from an academic and professional standpoint?
Yeah, so I'd say the clubs, at least as I understand it, now that I'm like more behind the scenes, they serve a dual purpose. So there's actual club membership, which is what I had, is where you like, and it's I think $50 a year is what they try to go for, but no child is ever turned away for an inability to pay. So anyone can be a club member, and that's where you're going through the different programming that they have. So they have something called, for example, Power Hour. When we come, we like have to do our homework immediately for like an hour. And then if we do that, then we get to play like a game like dodgeball or basketball or whatever have you. Then like they have a movie, and then they have like arts and crafts and like a lot of other programming. And then as you get older, the programming becomes more specific. So there's something called like a Keystone Club, which is like a leadership training curriculum program that you do as a teenager, where you're taking care of the younger kids, like the first graders and second graders that are part of the clubs. For the summer camp, there's a counselor and training program where they just like pay local high schoolers to take care of the kids and like work with the staff on like programming throughout the entire summer, and like a lot of stuff like that that's more robust, as well as other smaller things that are granted and gifted through corporations. So for example, UPS provided this like driving simulator with like a whole steering wheel and setup where they taught us how to drive. There's also sex education, a lot of other things like that. That was just able to develop me as like a whole person, but also of course education and academically as well. But then they also like have a lot of the facilities open for anyone. So I think that might be where like the idea of like you can just go there and play basketball and leave comes from, because they still want to provide a place and like a nexus for communities to be involved and for people to come. It's absolutely free. There's absolutely no membership dues if you're a teenager for Boys and Girls Clubs, because they really want to get like teenagers especially in a safe place after school. So I think that it kind of encompasses how they develop someone and how they develop me specifically too.
Sure. So for young people out there, for parents out there, I want you to be reminded that the Boys and Girls Club can feed into larger, more robust programs. I think that's part of what Kahlil is saying today, and that's something to know, because I remember going there and playing foosball, really, foosball tournament, and then you go home, but you used it and it became more of a resource for you, and that's what I want to raise awareness about today. Now, have you noticed Boys and Girls Clubs closing up around the country, or am I mistaken on that?
So yes and no. I'd say I'm part of the Greater Washington. So Greater Washington is one of the larger branches. So for example, there's like a Boys and Girls Club of like Southern Virginia, like a regional complex, and there's like different clubs within there. And like that might be a place where, by way of just like the nature of the location, it might be like a younger like part of the Boys and Girls Club's national branches, and it might have less funding. I'm sure they might have different issues than the Greater Washington one has. But like Greater Washington is centralized in DC, which is a major metropolitan area. And it was also created in 1884, which means it's just like old. So we haven't had too many financial hardships due to COVID specifically. But I will say there have been clubs that have closed. So one that I grew up near, I think it's called Silver Spring, Maryland. They had one there that was there for a long time that had to close down, I think, in previous years, just because of a lack of funding and support, which is why I stay involved and like do a bunch of fundraisers and give speeches and talk and am a liaison as best as I can, because at the end of the day, like they're just cutting it at best for most years. And that's like with a major metropolitan one in Washington, DC, that gets government funding and gets a lot of private donors. They're just making it. So I can only imagine throughout the country, in different places, it's very hard for them to stay afloat, even with the lacking effects of COVID, which is also why you'll probably see a lot of celebrities like LeBron James and Shaquille O'Neal and J-Lo and Mario Lopez and a lot of other like people that went through clubs really supporting them, because they are facing financial hardships. But luckily for the region that I'm in, I haven't seen too many closings.
Sure. And you also went to become an achiever within the Boys and Girls Club. Can you talk about that?
So in what sense? Like,
because you were actually inducted into the Greater Washington Hall of Fame.
Yeah, totally. So I'll talk about that. So that was something that happened this past January, because I want to say starting like last summer, I once again like got involved with them a lot by way of the like fundraisers and visiting the clubs and talking to people. And I think that was really helpful, because it like provided an avenue for me to support my community in a very clear and direct way. So I didn't have to like scramble and like find an organization or like, I don't know, try to start something of my own, which was really helpful. So I hosted a fundraiser. I had a speech thing that I gave at Georgetown, like a Georgetown home of a private donor back last November. And then that resulted in that donor giving over a 7-figure gift, which is like over $1 million to the clubs. And just by way of like that and then other fundraisers that I did, and just like the Canadian support and mentorship, they inducted me into the first class of the Hall of Fame this past January.
Phenomenal. Congratulations on that. That's
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
So what do you do for fun as a middle school young man going into high school? What sorts of things did you do for fun?
In middle school, my friends and I, we played basketball a lot. We played video games. We played Xbox, Call of Duty specifically. Also, there was like a faction of my friends that were really into like theater. So there was like this huge production of Little Shop of Horrors that was happening like in our spring that like took over 2 months. So like sometimes I would just like go like help them out with like sets and stuff. I was never a part of it formally myself, but it was just like something that our middle school really rallied around. What else in middle school, high school? That's all I can think of. Yeah.
So as you transitioned into high school and things start to get a little bit more serious for you, what was on your itinerary in high school?
So I actually didn't really like my high school because of like the aforementioned just exclusion and stuff. And I wanted to transfer to the high school that all my middle school friends went to, but my parents just didn't let me. So I had to kind of like ride it out. And I was like, if I'm going here, if I'm gonna like go through this intense program and like have to deal with all of this stuff that's around me, like, I might as well just get into like the best school I can. So I'd say from like the end of freshman year, I just resolved to like I want to stunt and like just get like into the best college I can. So I was targeting like Ivy Leagues and MIT and other schools like that. And to get there, obviously I had to get really good grades. So that was something I was always focused on. And I did participate in a few clubs too. I did 2 varsity sports. So I was on the varsity volleyball team and the varsity track and field team.
Okay.
And I did triple jump, which was like, I was the only triple jumper on the team. So I was like, that's my niche. So I just like got really good at that and got to like the regionals and stuff. And that was kind of what I was focused on in terms of just like throughout high school.
Nice. So triple jump is where you actually jump 3 times instead of just once.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's hop, skip, and a jump.
Tough sport, right?
Yeah, it's really tough to get into like the hang of it. But once you do, it's pretty fun.
Basically, you were learning how to fly. Let's go.
Exactly.
Nice. Now you talk about basically a life of sacrifice when you got into this high school because you really weren't in your favorite population as far as, you know, kids that you grew up with being there with you. And so you pretty much got to learn the value of sacrifice. What were you actually studying though? Were you learning how to code? Were you guys doing STEM research, STEM lessons? What was it like? What were you learning there?
So it was definitely all the above. So it was a mix of just like learning different disciplines, which includes so many different things. I was probably more focused on biology than any of the other ones. So whenever there was a chance to take an elective course, which is like something that they offered, I always took the biology focused ones. But in terms of overarching what we had to learn, it was like physics, earth and space sciences, like basically geology, engineering, robotics, computer science, software development, all of that. And then I always took I took a few classes around like genetics, biochemistry, like ecology and stuff like that when I had the opportunity. And outside of like those just classes, there was a lot of projects specifically that we had to do. So one is that we had to like code a Lego rover to be able to detect like whether or not it was in water or land. We had to build like a small like handheld submarine that didn't necessarily fit people, but was able to like float for as long as possible. We had to build a catapult that would accurately throw like a foam ball into a pin. And we had to like build a device that can measure the local water tower. So it was a lot of like projects. And like looking back, I guess like I like once again, it's very privileged to be a part of a program like that. And it was like really helpful in terms of that. But honestly, like the social barriers that were just impeding it, just like by way of me being far away from home, me being the only Black student, me like not necessarily coming from a magnet middle school, which prepared me for a high school that was that rigorous, it like really overshadowed any sort of willingness that I wanted to really learn. And I like, as I was going through, I was really just going through the motions and just like ready to leave at all moments. But at the end of the day, like it was something that was very unique and that most students across the nation, probably world, obviously, would not have access to.
Yeah, well, beyond the value that other people might get from exposure to a program like that, let's talk about how the onset of feeling like the only person like yourself in that school kind of opened your eyes about life in general, opened your eyes about the society that we live in today. You know, what was going through your mind? I mean, how did you cope with those 4 years or 3 years, however long you were in high school, with that reality?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I was a part of the Black Student Union as well, which is something that was really important, especially going into 2015, which was my sophomore year. And I think that's when Freddie Gray was shot, which is in Baltimore, which is like near where we live. So there was a lot of protests and stuff around that. And that opened my eyes to a lot. I think also like in terms of the question of educational access and educational equity, I think that was something that I was keenly aware of when I was a high schooler, because obviously the people from my middle school, like they went to a school called like Watkins Mill, which is like the least funded school in all of Montgomery County. And like, you could not tell like the county overall was like diverse or affluent or any of that, because the school was just like so forgotten by like county officials, and like the property taxes were not giving a lot of funding. My cousins went to that school too. Like it was just really bad. And like I was over here like maybe 2 hours away in like a totally different part of the county going to this really good school. And I just like obviously saw how there was a huge disparity there, and how like after me, like there were no Black kids admitted into the program like in the succeeding year. So I was just like, wow, like there's like no effort to rectify, which also awoken me to the complacency of the programs and like how diversity wasn't an interest, making up for the segregation and historical imbalance wasn't necessarily an interest, and how meritocracy, like blank face, is actually just, or meritocracy without corrective factors like affirmative action or whatever more someone can do, it just results in like these systems of racism just continuing, and the impediment of Black and brown kids getting access to these like pathways of higher education and just like professional skills that obviously like a lot of other students will get. Because once again, I think at the end of the day, like though, like I think there was a common thread or a common like joke that would happen, which is like not even a joke, and it's ridiculous. But they would always talk about, oh, like why are there no Black kids, blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay. And I think it was really interesting because I think it was a majority East Asian population, which made it even more, it made it more difficult to explain it to, because at the end of the day, like if there's like a white, like let's say there's a white kid, and there's probably many of them whose family is like from America, like they obviously are very keen and aware of like racial history. So even if they are racist, like they can't deny like civil rights movements. Like there's a lot of like understanding and lived experiences that they can point to. And the town that my school was in was like a KKK like haven. Even to this day, it's like some ways is.
What? Hold on.
Yeah.
For the remainder of this interview, let's slow it down a little bit.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of details.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that you think. I love the velocity of the things that you're saying, but you're saying some heavy stuff, you know, and I want people to be able to digest what it is that you're saying, because you were dealing with a lot. You were in a high school where, I mean, there are layers to what you're telling me, and I'm processing it with you. First of all, you see the difference between people who, you know, 2 counties over, who are, you know, pretty much living in just the bottom sector for what it's worth. But then you had this opportunity, maybe because your dad had an idea, or your brother led the way a little bit, to say, hey, no, let's steer Kahlil this way. So you land in this phenomenal school that is not very inclusive. You got Asian kids talking about, where's all the Black kids? Ha ha ha. And then you got people like Freddie Green, you know, out in the general public. He's losing his life. And so all these different dynamics are making you feel like, oh, no, I'm on fire. Oh, no, I have to go out here and be a doer, an achiever. I have to go out here and advocate, you know, focus on social change. So all these things are pretty much setting a fire to your jacket. So you were walking around on fire.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfect. You literally summed it up perfectly, probably better than I could myself, having even gone through those experiences. But I'll just like to really clarify. I'll break it down. So first we'll talk about the location of the school specifically and the history of that town. So it was a place called Poolesville, Maryland, which is right next to like the Potomac River or something, and like right next to the border of Virginia. And it was a historic, I think, battleground for the Civil War. And I think for a large part of the Civil War, it housed Confederate soldiers, so those fighting for the South for slavery. Moving forward, like there was a Black population because there was a lot of slavery like in the area, because once again, it was still the South. Maryland was the South in a lot of ways. So that legacy went down. There was a lot of Black people, also a lot of white people, much more. So in the 60s and 50s during integration, there were a lot of riots there saying like no N-words in our schools. And there's pictures of these in the archives of the town. There was like, I once again, there's no records of this, but by way of like oral histories, there was KKK presence. And then you fast forward to even now, and it is a rural part of Maryland. And there was a guy, I want to say his name is something Heimbach, Matt Heimbach, who was like one of the most outspoken people. I think he started a white student union at Towson University, was really pro-Trump. So there's a large history of just like white on Black racism in the town. So because it was rural and just generally the population is low, Montgomery County developed like this specific magnet school in that part of the county, because they would be able to create a school and just bus a lot of people in without having to worry about a lot of the local residents taking up like the spaces and the spots of it. So what that dynamic kind of shifts is like, one, a lot of people start moving towards Poolesville because they wanted their kids to go to this school, but then also because it's a magnet program, they have a system of busing kids from other parts of the county to this magnet high school. I was bused from a part of the county called Germantown, which is next to Gaithersburg, majority Black and brown, specifically in Gaithersburg, Germantown area. If you know the rapper Logic, he's from Gaithersburg. and YALE is also from there too, if that like kind of colors in any way. But I was bused there. But then a lot of the kids who are like East Asian and also white are bused from like other parts of Maryland, which include like Potomac and other parts of Germantown that are more like white and Asian. Also, other magnet middle schools that prepare you to go to a magnet high school, which I did not go to. So it just creates this really strange dynamic of like a really white community with a really good school in the middle of it, with specifically in the STEM program, a lot of like East Asian students and other white students bus from more affluent parts of the county. So hopefully that paints like a clear picture of what the school is like. So I'm coming there from a different part of the county called, once again, Gaithersburg, from Nielsen Middle School, bus to like 2 hours away from my home to Poolesville High School. And that, like, once again, being dropped into this place with a lot of history, a lot of different demographics is really like, it ended up being, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but like it ended up how it was, very damaging in a lot of ways. Because like I was saying about like the East Asian population there, a lot of them don't come from lived experiences of being in America for more than like, a lot of the parents, let's say, immigrated in either the 90s or the 80s. So they're coming in just like without a lot of context and like at least expressing it and being like, oh, like, why are there no black kids, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I can't tell you, let me tell you the history of America from like 1619 from now. But yeah, like, absolutely no awareness of this. So they would say the most like racist and vile things a lot of the time. And I honestly didn't understand it too at the time. I think now I'm saying like, let me explain the history of America. But at the time, like I was really internalizing a lot of those things. Like, are black kids like dumber? Are we just like ghetto and trying to like, I don't know, whatever the case, like all of the different horrible things they would say. This like before like cancel culture and like a really racial awakening, before like Michael Brown, a lot of those things that like created some sort of awakening in the consciousness of America. So I really didn't have answers. And I think that was internalizing a lot of like the different horrible things that they would say.
So let's take this moment and make it a victorious moment for all or as many as possible of the black and brown men and women in America right now who might be in situations similar to yours. Everything is very competitive. And let's drive this point home. You and your peers represent decades of black excellence. People who have made the sacrifice of being somewhere that maybe other people have not been, but you represent us there. You are someone, and your peers are people who continue to put us into upper echelons of society and upper echelons of achievement. And it didn't just start with you. So for the people who just got here into America last generation or the generation before, you come from people who have been achieving high generation after generation after generation after generation. And you are in the current class of high achievers of black and brown Americans. And so you are pushing the possibility frontier of a long, long legacy of achievement. And so I want to commend you for that today. And I want to commend your peers for that today as well. You guys are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, and now like I'm studying history at like the top institution in the world for such like studies, and specifically the history of social change and social movement. So if I had all the knowledge I had now back when I was like a teenager, I would be in a very much a different spot in terms of like my confidence and insecurities back then. But like I think it even goes back to just like the simple fact that the only reason people were even able to immigrate, especially like from non-white, non-European countries, specifically like East Asia, is because of like black activism in the first place. So it's just like it's really interesting and ironic that that was such the case. And I think even now, as it relates to stuff like the Cuban, Miami Cuban kind of like coalition to vote for Trump, and like a lot of racism that happens in Latinx communities and just all around the world. I think anti-blackness is just something you'll find in any community that isn't black, which is just like, once again, a continuing issue. But it's just ironic even more so because at the end of the day, black people have fought for rights that benefit everyone, from like how like the basic civil human rights that allow everyone in America, for example, who's born an American becomes a citizen. Like that's something that was started because of slavery and the Reconstruction era, and like something that black people fought for. So it's just ridiculous. Whatever. I think that's like the gist of it.
I'm with you. Hey, anti-blackness is a problem. It's counterproductive to all of our growth as a human society, as an African American population here in America, black and brown folks. And what's happening right now, what I feel happening right now, there's an undercurrent of understanding the true value of Blackness, which is the ultimate creativity, the ultimate cohesion, the ultimate prosperity and abundance for all. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Kahlil Greene right now, and we'll be right back after this brief message. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. And we're back. Kahlil, how you feeling out there?
I'm feeling good. We're getting some good, juicy stuff, and like my mind is just racing about things I want to say right now.
Oh yeah, listen, let's keep the conversation going. I want to bring it back this way. You are off the chain, man. You are great. You're it. You've got the world before you, and you've got great opportunities coming your way. This conversation is a victory for everybody. You by being hold on. Let's first let me say this. We are beginning to realize that we should all be embracing Blackness for what it's worth. Let me just put that out there. When we embrace Blackness, we are embracing white people. We are embracing Asian people. We are embracing everybody when we embrace Blackness. It's the Blackness that makes the world turn. It's the Blackness that we look forward to at 7 and 8 o'clock at night so that you can go to sleep, have a dream in that darkness, and wake up refreshed. And so we are having a great conversation today. And talk to us. Where are you going to school at these days?
I'm going to Yale University.
The Yale University.
Yep.
Yale. How does it feel to be a member of the student body there? And who are you in the student body of Yale University?
So I mean, I really, especially when I was a first year, when I was first coming in, I really liked it. Obviously Yale is very prestigious, very old. The academics are like amazing and great. The student body is pretty diverse, at least from like places that I've been to. So overall, I think it's been a really good experience. I think they really do a lot to foster the social life, which is unique amongst even other like Ivy Leagues and top colleges. Yale is a very social space where they, even from the first year, divide you into something called residential college communities, which are basically like dormitory courtyards that like have teams and like do intramurals together. So I think that has been a lot of why I've enjoyed my Yale experience overall. I had a lot of trouble in the beginning finding out what I wanted to do. So I came in studying computer science, following the STEM magnet that I went to. Then I realized I really didn't actually like STEM. I think I was kind of forced into it. So then I went to like econ to learn more about business. And I found that was just also something that I wasn't really interested in, I think specifically because I couldn't find how it would be applicable. Specifically econ, they didn't have a business major, so it wasn't like practical skills. It was like learning the theories behind markets and all of that, which are important. But I like in a conversation with someone one-on-one, I wasn't developing the skills around communication or understanding history or like social change that I wanted. So then I kind of directly just shifted to the history of social change. Specifically, I'm a history major, but then the pathway I'm on is called social change and social movements. They have other stuff around like war, around like economies, around like culture and fashion, around regions like Africa, Latin America, and United States. But this is what I solidified on because social change and social movements is actually a really broad concept that goes beyond just like what most people might think of initially, the civil rights movement or Black Lives Matter. But across societies and across the world, there have been so many. So, for example, if we have to study China and Mao, who was like the communist revolution in China, or like the communist revolutions in Latin America, or Russia, or even going back to like ancient Greece and Pericles and the Peloponnesian War, and how like politicians were able to use populism, which is just when you talk directly to citizens and say that there's like a higher up that's like bringing us down. Very Trump-esque. Trump is similarly populist, and how that riles up people's across time and space and across like human civilization. So that has been a really interesting thing for me to study specifically. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I just want to ask you a question. So you decided to study social change and movement at Yale University, which ended up being a very timely thing for you to study as a leader at Yale University, because we need minds like yours and conversations like these to understand the social climate that we're in today. We're currently changing presidencies, and we have a world climate right now that it deserves a little bit of clarification. Can you talk to us at a high level about what's going on in the world from your perspective and what's next?
Yeah. So what's going on in the world from my perspective? I think the reason there's such tension now is, if I had to attribute to a few things, I think it's one, people's ideas and the accessibility of ideas. So I think for the past, however, I think for all of human history, but specifically in American history, the past, however, 250 years, whatever you want to call it, there have been certain people who have been allowed to talk and say their ideas and write books and lead the way, and others that haven't. And maybe every once in a while, there'll be like a Frederick Douglass or a Harriet Tubman or whoever thinker, writer, XYZ in the Black community or Asian community or whatever, non-rich white male that has been able to singularly rise and get their voice heard. And that has catalyzed a lot of change, whether it be abolition or civil rights or end of Jim Crow. And I think as you go more and more throughout history, you start to see it less becoming one person and more becoming like groups. So like, let's say 1909, I believe, is when the NAACP was formed, which was like the first big civil rights organization that lasted a long time. And then the civil rights movement started to form as like people came together, and there's a lot of groups. There's Black Lives Matter, Black Panthers. Oh my gosh, Black Panthers. Then there's like SNCC, Ella Baker, and a lot of other organizations that come. And then now it's to the point where it's like not even an organization with like a set group of people in a hierarchy, but like movements. So like entire like Black Lives Matter, there's no like one person, like 200 or even 1,000 people that are a part of it. It's like anyone can be a part of it. And the same thing for other movements that are happening around, like, let's say like Occupy Wall Street or something like that, like these other things that are happening. And I think because now anyone can join and anyone can incorporate their voice or their ideas, you're starting to see like the fact that there's been always a large population of people in America who have been like subjugated and have like not wanted America to be how it is. So that's just like most easy example to think of is like slaves, like probably didn't want slavery. They didn't. I'm just like being funny, but like they did not want slavery. But they had no voice and they had no say. And then now to this day, like if people are in the same situation, there are a lot of places where they can't speak, but like at least in America, for the most part, those who have access to social media can say something about it. And you're seeing how like, whether it be people who are like trapped in generations of poverty or who are facing like racism by way of like being a part of an Ivy League institution that's also racist, or a high school that is, or just like, let's say Native Americans, who are probably the first group that was really oppressed and subjugated in America. They still are very much alive and doing activism and advocacy. You're able to hear their voices. And that really is causing attention, because stuff that has been like pushed down and just like people bury their heads in the sand, specifically like white ruling class, they have to come to kind of terms with it because it's becoming more popular. And I think we're just seeing a destabilization, like the chaos that ensues when two groups or like multiple groups are just butting heads and you can't silence any of them.
Do you foresee a day where, because of all of these folks waking up and speaking up, that we're going to have to kind of reset as a planetary human body? Like we're going to have to reset. Like what we thought about everybody has to change, because now we're hearing from everybody. So oh, it's not supposed to be this race here, this race here, this race here, and this race here, and treating the animals, even lower than that. Oh, it's not supposed to be happening like that at all. Oh, we got so much new information that we actually need to be conducting life differently on the planet Earth. Do you see that time coming?
I think it should come, but I don't know if it will come just by way of human nature. I see it more just being like, it ends up being that at least like American government or like electoral politics or whatever just becomes people become like so fed up with it that it becomes like destabilized, and like people just delegitimize it, as it's kind of happening right now in a slight way. But I can only see it getting worse from here. And then from there, there's like some power grab that happens, whether it be internally, and there's like some new reset of a nation that starts, and like America's constitution is kind of like ratified in a lot of different ways or entirely like rewritten. But that's like maybe hundreds of years down the line. That's wow. That's number one. Or two, because of the power imbalance, another nation or multiple nations come and try to take over America, specifically probably like China or another world power that's emerging in different parts of the world. But once again, like, there's not the fear monger. I don't think this will happen anytime like very soon. But I don't think American politics and America as a nation will ever really work, because like the vested interests of the people groups that are here are just like so different. And there's a lot, I think the whole melting pot, like salad, whatever you want to call it, way of thinking about how American like demographics are really diverse. I think it was a really good dream, and it's a really good thing to like hopefully aspire to, if everyone can be equal. But I think because of the inequalities, that's why it'll kind of always be some sort of back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And you are the first Black student body president at the Yale University in over 300 years. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get some hearts and likes in the building for Kahlil Greene. He is a very accomplished young man, and he is in a position of leadership, a unique position of leadership based on what he studies and where he is in our country. Now, Kahlil, would you agree that we have some of the finest talent here in America versus everybody else in the world? We have some of the finest talent that there is.
I would want to agree with that, but I think that's an idea called like American exceptionalism, which just puts America on a pedestal related to the rest of the world. And I think around the world, there's a lot of people with great ideas, whether it be like Malala, who's leading like women's rights in the Middle East, or just like a lot of other young people, Greta Thunberg, and just around the world. I think it's less so that America has the best, but America is able to amplify them more than other places. And I think if you go to around the world to a lot of kids who have great ideas but are not able to access education or a microphone, that you'll find a lot of talent there as well. But I think we're doing really good for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are excellent people all over the world, and America is no different. We have work to do in terms of uplifting one another. That is a never-ending task, but it's work that must be done. And it's work that you intend to do. Who do you intend to become after you graduate from Yale University in our society?
That's a big question. I don't know. I think what I intend to do, at least I know I want to be someone that always speaks my mind. I'll say that's number one. I don't want to like change to conform, whether it be like an interview or a policy thing that I have to like vote on. I think someone that I think about a lot, like let's say Bernie Sanders, for example. Like if you go back throughout his record, like I don't think he supported the Iraq War. I don't think he supported like crime bills or anything like that. Even when they were the most popular thing. Whereas if you go like, for example, Joe Biden, like he did support a lot of these things, and now he has to come to terms with how like harmful those were. Or even Kamala Harris, which is like, obviously she's a Black woman, so a lot of Black people support her. But if you look back at her record, she was jailing like children and parents for like truancy, as opposed to like getting social workers to help get people access to education. And I think that, and then obviously now their tune is switched up because they're running for elected office at the national level. But like if I ever like do anything like that, I just want to be able to look back, and even if it wasn't the most popular thing, just say that like what my decisions align with my morals. I always spoke out against things I didn't believe in, so that I'm more like in a Bernie-esque situation than like anyone else. And I think that's probably what I'll be, like someone who's just like true to my beliefs and just like always trying to push society forward in the best way that I can think of at the moment.
Are you familiar with foster care?
I am familiar with like it as a topic, but I haven't like done research or experienced it myself.
Mhm. Foster care is a circumstance where you have at least the suspicion of something wrong happening in your house.
Mhm.
And so, based on investigation or a quasi investigation, your children are removed from your home and they are placed with different people who have become foster parents.
Mhm.
Right now, there are over 400,000 youth in a foster care system today. And these are young people who have been removed from their homes. They have been removed from their environments. They might be estranged or at more of a disadvantage based off of just being taken from their family and where they are. And so I see that when people get to a national level, national politics, national organizations, they don't always know about foster care. And part of my objective is to change that.
Mhm.
Do you see, just from what I've just said, that foster care is something that we need to pay attention to as we consider social change in America?
Yeah, and I think that goes into at least like I once again I 100% agree with you. Like as a topic, it's not directly touched on a lot, but I know at least in terms of political parties and like even coalitions within parties, like Democrat and Democrat socialists, their main platform is to build a level of social welfare and like subsistence for like most Americans, so that like no matter what kind of like life traumas or situations you find yourself in, you're able to get a great access to education, a great access to like support networks and mentorship, a great access to education, a great access to like building like a life for yourself. And I think that opposes the more individualistic, capitalistic like idea of America, where like everyone's on your own. We're gonna try to deregulate and like hopefully the markets will work, but like you just need to work hard on your own. And like no matter who you are, if you work hard, you'll make it. But obviously, not everyone's coming from the same situation starting out, so that doesn't really even make much sense in my opinion. But I think having a lot of like social welfare reforms, and not necessarily in a way that like is demonized by Republican parties where people are just like given free money, but in a way where they're giving free resources, bare minimum resources, like social workers or social care or like mental health services, which would not only tackle the problem of like parenting and how that can go wrong with like either mental health or alcoholism or whatever case have you, like getting people to like help those people through what they're dealing with would be a step one to hopefully not taking children away from parents. But then even if that case is absolutely necessary, making sure that the foster care system has enough funding and support and awareness for like the children, but also like any foster parents that want to come, but then also like transitioning out of the foster system into like the real world, like making sure that everyone has the resources to start out at some like the floor, like the lower floor being raised so that everyone's kind of at the same spot, I think is a lot better. And I think that's why like I'm really big on like social investment in America.
Nice. What do you intend to do after you graduate? Like, what would be your ideal first career?
I don't know. I think I'll probably go to graduate school and study law or
Okay.
business, just to, like understand the world more.
Mhm.
And then after that, maybe like consulting just to get like a really good skill set in terms of like advocacy and presentation and research. And then from there, I'm just like really not sure. I think maybe working at some organization or building up some political influence in one way or another.
Mhm. I want to encourage you to continue to be observant of the world that we live in.
Mhm.
Continue to be observant of the histories that you're learning. Look at the parables that are put in front of you. See the deeper meaning in them. And as you emerge as a man in society, I want to encourage you to continue to make things right as best as you can. I
Mhm.
think that we're looking at the makings of a powerful man. We might look up 5 or 10 years from now, and you might either be leading a social organization, making a huge impact in your local or national community, or just being a great person. And I appreciate you stopping here on America's Next Motivator so I can share that with you.
Of course. No, this has been so much fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Now, do you do speaking engagements or anything like that?
So funny enough, I'm asking. I contacted an agency recently. I guess it's probably in the wraps, but like, I won't say which one. And I'll be meeting with them tomorrow to like pitch some talks that I might do. But as of right now, I haven't done anything. But I guess like in terms of any audience viewers, you can follow me at Kahlil.Greene on Instagram, which is my main social media, KAHLIL.GREENE. And you'll find not only like my stories are full of political stuff that I just put out every day, but I also have a ton of op-eds that I write. Like I'm really big. It's KAHLIL. The A is before the A.
Oh yeah, okay.
The AH. But then it's full of like political things that I've like talked about. So I wrote 2 weeks ago, I think, published in the Washington Post, an article about the Trump administration and its attack on affirmative action. On election day, I posted about children and why we need to teach children about power dynamics and civics and education around like electoral politics, even though they can't vote. I've also written about like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So that's my main platform to reach people right now. But I do want to start speaking very soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This will always be a place where you can stop by, share some thoughts and perspective. I love to go back and forth with you, pick your mind and and challenge you as well. That's what I do. Now, I went out there and found a video about you, and I'm going to play that video as we go on third base here. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
All righty. Let's get some hearts and likes in the building, y'all, for Kahlil Greene. He's not playing any games out here.
Germantown native Kahlil Greene has just made history. Greene is a rising junior at Yale University.
He's a senior now, we know that.
The first African American to hold that office since the school was established 318 years ago.
Hey, Kahlil. Nice to meet you.
I caught up with him at the Boys and Girls Club in Germantown, a place that Kahlil says was formidable in his development as a child.
How's everything? It's going really well. I'm having a great summer. Everything's kind of coming together. It's a lot to take in. Are you guys in? First grade. So I came in when I was in second grade. So I was 1 year older than they are.
Kahlil attended Daly Elementary School and Neilsville Middle School before entering the magnet program at Poolsville High School. He told us this urban-rural education experience felt like two different worlds.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that experience.
So I think it's important to start with where I was before Poolsville, which is Neilsville Middle School, majority Black and Hispanic school. So coming to Poolsville was a huge, I guess, like culture shock. So in the program that I was in, so there were three main ones. I was in the one focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I was the only African-American student. By the time I graduated, there were no Latino students, Latinx students. I don't believe there were any Native or Native American students there. Also that lack of, I guess, like experience of having people who look like you, having mentors that look like you, just adds another layer that makes it that much harder to get through these different like obstacles and these different classes and all these things going on in high school. I feel like each step in the process kind of changes your trajectory. So going to Poolsville was like the link to me going to Yale and coming here. It's a link to me coming to student body president. So what it means to me is that I just feel like it's so important to have, I guess, equity, have these opportunities available to everyone. I think that's like the best thing. The opportunity should be available to anyone, no matter your background, no matter where you're from. It's important to have those mentors and having people come from places that you're from. And what I hope happens is that is balanced out, that there's diversity, that we're encouraging everyone across the county to go to these magnet schools to achieve and to have people that they can look up to, because I think that's so important.
I have to tell you, I just
Nice.
got chills because what you just
So now, Kahlil, can you talk to us about what's next? I mean, are you planning on doing anything to achieve equity in the ways that you talk about equity? Because that's a strong buzzword that you use. And then I'm going to move into the rest of the interview. So how do you plan on accomplishing equities in the future?
Yeah. So in terms of what's next, I think it's very easy to answer if you're talking about like, let's say the next year, right? So I'll probably be taking a semester off of school this upcoming semester because I just really not learning in Zoom, and I also want to extend like my time at Yale a little bit. Yeah. And in that time, I'm working on a new program with an organization called Citizen University, which is something that's like just started like even like yesterday, but it's going to be to mentorship high schoolers about the different ways to get involved with civic like community involvement, all of those civic engagement So that what civic engagement is, it's like the different ways that you as a person in democracy can influence politics and the world around you. So voting is one, obviously the most prominent like this week, but there's also protests, there's lobbying, there's advocacy in its multiple forms and a lot of different things other than that. So I'll be like working with a cohort of some high schoolers and mentoring them for an entire year. It's a year-long commitment. I'll also be doing a lot of work with the Boys and Girls Club still, hopefully continuing. I had a online course with them in the spring where I taught the kids pretty much similar concepts, but more with a history focus, so like the history of criminal justice, the history of electoral politics, the history of protests in America. And that was also something that I found like really fun. So I'm like doing a lot of teaching, I guess. Maybe that's what it looks like in the upcoming like year.
I'm looking forward to big things from you. I want to let you know, Kahlil, that I've listened to you today, that I've heard your story, and I'm putting some respect on your journey. You've been through some fire, and I'm clear that going forward, you have not had it easy, that you've overcome adversities, and that you continue to be a leader in your own space. I want to give you a crown today while you're still alive, and I want to give you a respect while you can still receive it. I want to let the world know, hey, get your crown emojis ready out there on our phone, because Kahlil Greene, you are America's next motivator.
Thank you. That's the best way to start my morning, to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you continue to have a great rest of the day, okay?
Okay, thank you. You too.
You're welcome.
Everyone stay safe. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator is going to have something here for you. All you've got to do is stop by and pick it up.